Joining us now, what a special treat for you. I had a chance to be on a panel with him yesterday, Dr. Nabeel Khoury, and he is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Khoury Center for the Middle East. Now, his commentaries appear regularly on the Atlantic Council's MENA Resource, MENA, the Cairo Review of Global Affairs, and his own blog, Middle East Corner. Now, after serving 25 years in the Foreign Service, Dr. Khoury retired from the U.S. Department of State in 2013 with the rank of Minister Counselor. He taught Middle East and U.S. strategy courses at the National Defense University and Northwestern University. In his last overseas posting, Dr. K served as Deputy Chief of Mission to the U.S. Embassy in Yemen. In 2003, during the Iraq War, he served as department spokesperson for U.S. Central Command in Doha and in Baghdad. So Dr. K coming to us with, shall we say, vaulted and very impressive credentials. Plus, he's a really cool guy. That's why we're having him on. Dr. K, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, John, how are you? Thanks for having me on. And I like your calling me Dr. K. It's something I fancied after my basketball hero of the 70s, Dr. J. So I like that.
Dr. J and Dr. K, Julius Irving. I grew up in the New York, New Jersey area, and I remember my father taking me to see Dr. J play when he was at the Nets. And they played Long Island or something. We'd have to take the train out there. But my father, too, a big Dr. J fan, and so was I. And he was kind of the first guy in the NBA to do the razzle-dazzle.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, he was like a ballet player of the basketball players.
Exactly. The one and only Dr. J with the afro. So, Dr. K, I really want to talk about the Yemeni situation and this very troubling Saudi Emirates coalition, if you will. The U.S. is backing them. The U.K. is backing them. Now we've got the UN alleging that there may be war crimes, and they want a tribunal on that. We've got the horrible bombing of not only the school bus with 29 children on it, bombed by U.S.-made bombs, but then we've also got, just the other day, the bombing in the market, killing women and children. What is the story here, sir?
Well, John, the Yemeni situation is probably the worst humanitarian situation we've seen since World War II. Unfortunately for many Americans as well as Europeans, far from sight is far from mind. People don't focus too much, and the international media doesn't focus too much on that situation. But Yemen is the poorest country in the Arab world, and already before this war started, they were in a bad way and needed a lot of development assistance. With the beginning of the war in 2015, the country has been blockaded by air, by land, by sea, and so food and medicine are hard to come by. And then the Arab coalition, Saudi, Emirati force, has been bombing them on a daily basis. And so there's starvation, there's the spread of cholera. People are dying not just from the bombs, but from just living under very, very poor conditions. And the sad thing about this is that this is all a man-made phenomenon. This war was not necessary. The Saudi Arabia, under its new de facto ruler, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS as he is often known, he wants to challenge Iran for supremacy in the Middle East. And he's choosing to do that by drawing a line in Yemen. Unfortunately, Iranians are not really in Yemen. They may be lending some assistance to a group called the Houthis whom the Saudis hate and are following with their military action. But that assistance is minimal. There are no actual foot soldiers from Iran in Yemen. And unfortunately, the Trump administration has been going along with the Saudi perspective, and therefore lending a lot of assistance to Saudi Arabia. And only now has the Pentagon been raising a red flag that, hey, there are kids that are dying down there, and they're dying mostly with American weapons used by the Saudis. So I'm glad that there is some attention now being focused on the issue, but it's a bit too little too late.
So this coalition between UAE, the Emirates, and the Saudis, I mean, they're not fighting the Yemeni government, right? They're ostensibly saying they're fighting the Houthis because they're saying that the Houthis are an agent of Iran. So Iran becomes the big bogeyman here that they set up for the U.S. neocons to get involved, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But what is the objective here? Like, what do the Emirates and Saudi, what's their end game?
Well, here's the thing, is that what happened in 2011 was the Arab youth uprising in several Arab countries, including Yemen. In Yemen, that uprising led to the fall of the government of the previous president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and created a bit of a void in that his successor was not as strong as he was. The Houthis, who are a big tribe in the northern part of Yemen, moved on the capital of Yemen, Sana'a, and took over power from that new president, Hadi. Hadi escaped first to the south and then off to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he's been living and working out of there. So the Houthis made the first mistake by trying to take over the whole country, something they couldn't have done under any circumstance because Yemenis are fighters and the tribes resist encroachments by outsiders to their turf. The Yemenis were perfectly capable in fighting back against the Houthis. Now, at that point, Iran had not yet intervened. In fact, they had very minimal relations with the Houthis. But the Saudis, looking ahead, were afraid that because there is a religious proximity between the Houthis' Zaydi faith and the Iranian Shia faith, that the two would end up together and that Iran would be at the borders of Saudi Arabia. So they started fighting the Houthis ostensibly to bring them back to their own turf and bring back the legitimate government of Yemen to the capital. Now, as a goal, that would have been a fine thing, except that you could have done this diplomatically. You could have done it with economic aid. You did not do it with a destructive war to achieve that same purpose. And here we are almost 4 years after the beginning of that war, and they have not achieved their goal.
Dr. K, let me just ask you this. So we've got the neocons in the government that basically have so much power. You know, somehow they've sucked us in. We are now, the U.S. is supporting the Saudi Emirates coalition, right? They're advising pilots, they're advising on strategy, they're advising troops on the ground. We've also got the $1.1 billion arms sale deal between the Saudis and the U.S., so there's a lot of money involved. The Saudis buying these armaments. Some of the armaments they're buying for the U.S. end up blowing up a school bus. Why is the U.S. involved here? Why can't we just get out and let them figure it out? Explain that.
Yeah, well, ironically, the Obama administration started our involvement in Yemen for the same reason that Donald Trump did, a slightly different perspective. But both administrations have been concerned with Iran, not with Yemen per se. So for Obama, he wanted to have a peace deal with Iran, and he started to engage them in talks to reach a nuclear agreement to stop the Iran nuclear program. The Saudis were very upset because they hate Iran, and they told Obama that he was wrong to try to make peace with them. In order to appease the Saudis, Obama decided to not interfere directly in their war in Yemen, but to help them out. So he offered logistical support, meaning support in refueling their jet planes on their bombing raids, and support with intelligence, and support with a naval blockade of Yemen. So, I mean, even though the U.S. was not participating directly in fighting the Houthis, the Saudis could not have engaged in this war without critical American support. And in comes Trump, and again, because of Iran, but for a different reason. Trump hated the nuclear agreement that Obama signed with Iran, and in order to confront Iran, he agreed with the Saudis that he should continue providing U.S. support. Add to that the fact that Trump cares a lot about money, and he liked the arms deals with Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and he kept pressing them to buy more and more weapons, and in return for their billions, he agreed to continue providing American assistance.
So where do we go from here? I mean, there's been 50,000 casualties in this war. Aside from that, Dr. K, you've now got the UN. They want to set up a tribunal to look here at war crimes. You've got the allegations. You got three allegations here. Number one, war crimes. Number two is the reports that have come out on the Emiratis jails there and the abuse that they've raped prisoners. This is alleged, and things of that nature. All bad, horrible stuff. And that's number two. And then you've got the allegation that came from the ambassador to the U.S. of Qatar, Michelle Al-Thani, yesterday, I think, did a op-ed in the Washington Post alleging that the coalition was giving preferential treatment and recruiting Al-Qaeda fighters to be part of their effort and giving them safe passage. Now, that's a pretty serious allegation. So you have these three things going on. What should the U.S. do?
Yeah, well, here's the thing, is that in addition to the humanitarian disaster that we are helping perpetrate, exposing the U.S. to accusations of war crimes, in addition to that, it is not in the U.S. national interest to allow this chaos to continue in Yemen, because it is breeding grounds for Al-Qaeda and for ISIS. ISIS, which has been defeated in Iraq and Syria, has now a branch in Yemen. And so as the lawlessness continues in Yemen, terrorism grows, and eventually it's going to come back to bite us in the rear somewhere. And so it's really a very bad decision to continue U.S. involvement and U.S. encouragement of this war. The wise thing to do would be for the U.S. to say enough is enough. This war has got to stop. First of all, cut off any arms supplies to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and say your legitimate defense is fine, but what you're doing in Yemen is far beyond that. So you stop what you're doing right now, and we're going to lend you American diplomatic assistance to try to bring the warring factions in Yemen to peace talks, and we'd like to restore peace and stability to that country, not only for humanitarian reasons, but also for the U.S. national security interest.
So, Dr. K, basically you would want to see President Trump show leadership here by saying, look, we're getting out of this thing, and to launch a very significant diplomatic effort, get all the parties together and get this thing resolved and stop the horrific bloodshed that's going on.
That's right. I think, Donald Trump wants to make a difference in the world, and that's the way to make a difference, by helping to bring peace, not disaster, to people in the world. And MBS in Saudi Arabia, he's a young guy. He's been very aggressively leading a country that has been known historically for being very cautious and very conservative. He wants to be the leader in his region. Well, my advice to him is lead by bringing peace, by bringing prosperity. You lead a very rich country. You could have rebuilt all of Yemen and made peace with the Houthis without going through this expensive war. And this war is bleeding Saudi Arabia, by the way. They're losing their foreign reserves daily. So he's acting very foolishly as well.
No question about it. Dr. K, we're out of time. I really thank you for being with us. We got to have you on now on a regular basis, because we have to follow what the UN is going to do and whether or not Nikki Haley vetoes the UN Security Council call for an investigation. I don't think she is. Most people think the U.S. is going to exercise a veto. I would hope not, but we got to go. You can follow Dr. Khoury on Twitter he's like hip. He's a hip guy. He's on Twitter at Khoury, Khoury _Nabeel, Nabeel. Dr. K, thanks for being with us. I got to roll. Thank you,
John.